What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a moment to break down the Final Four for college basketball's March Madness tournament. We are in the last weekend, last Saturday plus Monday. I don't understand why college sports insist on having their championship games on Mondays. It'll never make sense to me. But coming up on the last couple of games of the college basketball season, and there are some really fun potential championship game matchups. So we're going to look at how we got here, what the potential matchups are, and who we think is going to win. And then at the end of this podcast, Matt and I are actually going to start getting into our NFL draft coverage by giving you like our initial thoughts from the draft, maybe some funny stuff, maybe some serious stuff here at the end. Because starting next week, we're doing our in-depth draft coverage leading up to the NFL draft, the end of this month in Detroit, that Matt and I are going to be attending, or we're going to try to attend. It seems to be getting more complicated to attend by the day. So we'll figure that out. But first draft podcast next week is going to be the big draft debates, where Matt and I fall on a lot of those, and then some of the big storylines for this draft to watch for. We will also have our My Guys podcast this month, one of our best podcasts every year. Also going to have our friends from Certified Beef, Brandon and Jack, on to do a mock draft. We got all sorts of fun stuff coming up this month, and then we'll do a couple draft recap podcast after the NFL draft. So a lot to look forward to. But before we kick off this episode, just a reminder that you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. Reach out, let us know what's working, what's not on the podcast, what you would like to hear more of, or if you just want to chit chat with me and Matt about sports or anything you heard on the podcast, you're welcome to do that too. I promise you will not get any spam from us until the Patriots draft JJ McCarthy at 3, and I send you my manifesto, because I think it's going to happen and it might kill me. And we might be talking about at the end of this podcast. So college basketball, Final Four, championship game, and then some draft stuff at the end with Matt. Let's go get him, and let's go. We are back. Matt is here. I had to record without you last week because I was on a work trip.
Yeah.
And whenever I record without Matt, I feel like it's been a year since we talked.
Yeah. Well, and the irony is I was sitting around. I think was it Monday night? It might have been Monday night. I don't know. It was whatever night you recorded. And I just kept my phone on hand. I'm like, all right, who let me know if we're going to record. And then it's 9 o'clock. I'm like, okay, well, we're definitely not recording tonight. He's done. 11:30, 4 text messages come through from you talking about recording tonight. I'm like, well, this got fucked.
I know. I text you at I think it was 8 or 8:15, and I was like, all right, I'm sending you the invite for the Zoom call. And I sat there for legitimately 45 minutes watching Netflix, waiting for you to join the call. And I was like, oh, well, he must have fallen asleep or something. So I was like, I'm ripping this podcast off by myself. Yeah, I was in Georgia for crucial conversations training for work last week.
Going to Georgia seems a bit much.
Yeah. Well, you know what my problem with Georgia is. I think anybody who's listened to this podcast long enough knows my problem with Georgia is that it's like a third world state where you can't gamble online.
Yeah.
The fuck? Come on, Georgia. Everybody else has legalized it except for Georgia. I'm sitting there last week. I'm like, ooh, hockey and basketball on tonight. I want to place some bets. And the thing's like, oh, sorry, you're in Georgia. You can't. So thanks, Georgia. But I thought that
honestly, I was expecting you to make a Falcons joke, but
no, I love the Falcons. I love them. Well, I have a love-hate relationship with the Falcons after last season.
Yeah.
On one hand, 28-3, but on the other hand, they totally fucked me on everything last year. So I would say me and Atlanta are even. But I thought the training was very timely because I feel like we need to have a crucial conversation right now about the state of men's college basketball. And that conversation is, Is DJ Burns the greatest fat college athlete that we've ever had? No, that's not really the conversation. The question I have for you after everything that's happened in the last week since I last recorded is the women's tournament more interesting than the men's?
No, unequivocally.
I honestly don't remember a men's game that was as hyped up as the Iowa versus LSU Elite Eight game was this past week. Even my boss asked me about it on Monday. He's not like a big sports guy. And he was like, one of my friends asked me to come over to watch a game tonight. What game's on tonight? And I was like, oh, it's this huge women's basketball game, which it felt a little bit weird saying that, but I was like, hold on, let me explain. And I sat there and explained to him for like 10 minutes about why it was such an important game. I mean, if you don't know, Iowa has a woman on their team, a girl on their team who is like the transformational player in women's basketball named Caitlin Clark. She's got the deep threes, a lot of like the step back stuff, a lot of like moves that look like NBA moves to hit these threes. She's incredible. Probably going to be the best female player in the world within the next 3 years if she's like not already.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to disparage the women in the WNBA already because there's a lot of really good players, but it's not going to be that long until she's the best player in the world. So they went to the NCAA championship last year. They lose to LSU. And during the loss to LSU, there's a LSU star player, Angel Reese, or one of LSU star players, kind of like taunted Caitlin Clark. It became this huge deal. Joe Biden's like, well, we should just invite both of them to the White House because they played such a good game, even though you never, ever invite the losers to the White House. Like a bunch of stupid shit. And then there's a bunch of like debates about all sorts of stuff that we're not going to get into on this podcast. But what you need to know is LSU beat them in the championship last year. The best player on LSU was taunting Caitlin Clark. They come back this year, play each other in the Elite Eight. So it's already hyped up enough. It's a huge deal. Then during warmups, Caitlin Clark is out shooting, and Angel Reese goes and puts a literal crown on LSU's bench to remind everybody who the champion is. And fucking Caitlin Clark comes out, hits 9 threes, drops 41 points and 12 assists to get revenge on LSU.
Yeah.
I'm just like, this game had everything narratively that is missing from men's college basketball.
Yeah.
The rivalry, the like star players that had the
players
star power
that you actually know who they are. Honestly, like other than maybe Zach Edey, was there any player that just like casual fans would have known about?
I would defy casual men's college basketball fans to name 4 guys who are playing in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people might be able to now because we've been watching these teams for a couple weeks, but I think the majority of people, like we talked about this on our March Madness kickoff podcast, is that there's not a lot of star power in this tournament because college basketball, men's college basketball, relies on having super freshmen basically to have star power. You know, you need the Zions, you need the Trae Youngs, the Cade Cunninghams, you need those kind of guys that are going to be big NBA draft prospects because these dudes don't hang around long enough. Like the really good players don't hang around long enough to build these storylines that get cashed in on in later years.
Yeah.
Like Caitlin Clark's a senior. Angel Reese is a senior. They're both going to be in the WNBA draft this year. You know, if that game, and so that game got 12.3 million viewers, the most ever for a women's college basketball game. If that's not enough for you, this next weekend, Iowa plays UConn. So now you have Caitlin Clark, the transformational women's college basketball player, going up against the dynasty in UConn and this team that's dominated women's. I mean, they haven't in recent years, but like there's a long, long stretch where they were just dominating women's college basketball. And there was a story this week about how when Caitlin Clark was in high school and she was a highly touted prospect coming out, the only school she ever wanted to play for was UConn. And UConn didn't even give her a look. They didn't give her a conversation, didn't give her an offer, even though she was one of the top women's players in the nation. And they have this girl, Paige Buchers, who's like another really good, you know, female college basketball player. So now it's like Caitlin versus Paige. Caitlin's going up against this team that was like her dream to play for. She has pictures in her room of herself in a like a cartoon version of herself in a UConn jersey. She owns UConn jersey. All she ever wanted to do was get out of Iowa because she grew up in Des Moines and go and play at UConn. And now she's repping the home team Iowa against UConn in the Final Four. Like that, we don't have these narratives in the men's college like Final Four.
No.
And everybody's entitled to their opinion about the quality of the basketball that's being played. Like I would say, in my opinion, that the college basketball being played on the men's side is more exciting. It's better basketball, but like you don't have the buildup and you don't have this like cachet of these star players going up against each other, these people that have had these storylines developing for so many years because the good players leave so early.
Yeah.
Like if this was the men's side or if the WNBA worked the same way that the NBA does, Paige Buchers and Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all these people would all have been in the league a long time ago.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that like women's college basketball has surpassed men's. The reality remains that like the explosive potential that men have just makes the game more entertaining to watch. It does. And that's just physiological differences. However, like women's is far more interesting, I would say right now. Great, Zach Edey, you've been killing it, but also I'm kind of tired of watching the teams that you were playing against just kind of fall apart in your path and get out of your way. Like,
yeah, the best comparison I can think of for what's going on right now is that like the men's college basketball is like a action movie that's just like exciting to watch, but like the story sucks. But you're like, I don't like. Yeah. Have you seen the movie Smoking Aces?
Yeah.
I love this movie. So I'm not dissing it, but it is what like it is. It's very just is what it is, where it's just like a half an hour of setup so they can get to a full hour of like bullets flying everywhere and people dying and like all sorts of crazy shit happening. But the story sucks. And it's not like, it's not a story driven film. It's like action. It's like, Fast and Furious. Like, we're going to make this car jump from one tower to another tower in Las Vegas in midair. Haha, watch this. But there's no
family.
But then like women's college basketball is just like excellent storytelling going on and a lot of buildup, but like there's not a ton of action in the movie.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what we're watching. Like the rivalries and the star power really carry it. I was thinking about Zach Edey, who you mentioned, because he was the biggest name going into the tournament. And we've talked about him every week. We're going to talk about him some more in a little bit. But I was like, who is Zach Edey's rival in men's college basketball? Is it doorways with low arches?
Yeah.
Is it ladders? Like he didn't climb the ladder last week to cut the nets down. He just stood there and did it, which is crazy on its own.
Yeah, I would imagine that his rival is probably like mainstream clothing.
Probably shoes.
Yeah.
Just non-custom shoes, dorm beds. But I mean, in men's college basketball, we had a rematch of last year's championship as well with UConn versus San Diego State in the Elite Eight, and nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
There wasn't any reason to. It's like UConn's just been steamrolling everybody. They steamrolled San Diego State in the game last year, and even though they played, there's no like tension. There's no, the Angel Reese going up to Caitlin Clark and like pointing at her ring finger and being like, I got a ring. And I don't know. I feel like that game and just women's college basketball in general is cashing in on like all of the sports movie tropes that we love. And like, when you hear those old stories about Michael Jordan or like Patrick Ewing, and it's like, oh, someone said something to Michael Jordan when he was a freshman at UNC. So he came back as a sophomore and like remembered that and was like, I'm dropping 50 on these guys. That's what Caitlin Clark did on Monday. You know,
Yeah,
we've gone from not talking about women's college basketball to comparing Caitlin Clark to Michael Jordan within the span of 10 minutes of this podcast. But
you
it's the,
did. You
yeah,
did.
no, and I'm going to keep doing it. But that's the whole thing is like, those are the stories we love of like,
Yeah.
you know, these people were taunting her. They put a crown on the bench. They did all this shit. And she comes out and drops a 40 ball.
Yeah, she is not the kind of personality that you want to give something to feed off of.
Yeah. She has that like killer instinct of like
Yeah,
the Tom Brady, the Michael Jordan, like, oh, you said the wrong shit. And now here I come.
you're gonna learn to stay.
Yeah. She's going to be the first pick in the women's, in the WNBA draft if she goes that route. Ice Cube offered her like $5 million to come play in the Big Three for 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which is way more money than she's going to make going to the WNBA. So like
Honestly.
maybe it's something she should consider. She's a transformational player for women's college basketball. Enough so that 12.3 million people turned into Iowa versus LSU. And
Yeah.
that's what the men's tournament has been missing is like, you know, we tune in to watch basketball and watch March Madness. But what is like the draw for the casual fans? Is it just supposed to be that it's the Final Four? Like what's the story that we're selling to people? What are we hyping up?
We've kind of lost some of the old draws that like wasn't players, right? Like Coach K is gone. Boeheim's gone, right? Like a lot of some of these more storied coaches that were like, you know, coaching a lot of these teams that were going deep year after year, they're not here anymore. So like we don't even have that. I mean, it's to the point now where when there's a weak recruiting class, that just means it's going to be a weak year for college basketball because there's not any stars.
You know, we're making the men's tournament sound like it's totally like bereft of excitement and stuff. 15 million people tuned in to watch NC State versus Duke in the Elite Eight. So just to think about that, the Iowa versus LSU women's game was the most watched women's game of all time at 12 million people. And then NC State played Duke on Easter Sunday and like 15 million people tuned in to watch that one. So
yeah,
still a ways to go to close the gap, but we do
but it's much closer than it was even like 5 years ago.
For sure. It's going to be tough when Caitlin Clark leaves though.
Yeah.
Because like she's a draw on her own. She just set the record for most points ever by a college basketball player, passing like Pete Maravich, which it's not the same record. We've gone over this on the podcast before, but you know, whatever. So she's definitely a draw. But we do have a Final Four for men's college basketball now that we got that conversation out of the way. Crucial. Do you feel like my crucial conversations training paid off for that? Do you feel like that went well and our relationship got better after having that conversation?
Nailed it.
Awesome. So
right
Final Four.
Until you mentioned Michael Jordan, but
yeah, sorry. When I compared Caitlin Clark to Michael Jordan and Tom Brady, I could Matt's eyes just glazed over, and he's like, "Oh God, here we go."
This motherfucker.
So men's Final Four: UConn versus Alabama, Purdue versus NC State on Saturday. I can't promise anybody that this is going to be a great Saturday for college basketball. I think both of the spreads on these are like pretty high at this point. I think last I saw was UConn by 9.5 and Purdue by 7.5.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of a feeling of inevitability that that's where we're heading is UConn versus Purdue. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing because I look at these four teams and try to think about, okay, what's the best matchup? And UConn has by far been the best team in this tournament. They've been winning by an average of 27.5 points per game
Yeah.
which would, if it holds, would break the record for highest winning margin of a team that won the championship in the tournament. Current record is 23 and a half points per game by 1967 UCLA, which was led by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So by far the best team in the country. And then on the other side with Purdue, you have the guy who's by far been the best player in this tournament, and Zach Edey, which this is the one thing about the NCAA tournament I got right this year, was that it was the Zach Edey Legacy Tournament. Dropped 40 and 16 on Tennessee the other day, making him the first player since Larry Bird to have 925 points and 450 rebounds in a season. Also, the first player to have 120 points and 65 rebounds in a single tournament since Larry Bird, who did both those things in the same season. So I think that's your narrative right there for that championship matchup is like, okay, we got the best player in the country in Zach Edey. We got the best team in the country in UConn, maybe one of the best teams that we've seen in quite some time going up against each other. I think that's how you sell that one.
Yeah.
The other matchups, not as exciting to me.
Well, you're not as excited about DJ Burns.
I mean, I'm excited about DJ Burns. I'm not talking about in the championship. I'm not talking about in this week. I'm just like generally excited about DJ Burns. I think DJ Burns has been the breakout player of the tournament.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's close. Like, I think we knew about Zach Edey before, and he's been the best player. But for the guy whose profile has raised the most since the beginning of this tournament, the guy who, like, I didn't know going into the tournament. I'm sure a lot of people didn't know going into the tournament, who now I'm obsessed with watching. And I get my dream matchup this weekend of DJ Burns versus Zach Edey, the matchup I've been asking for like 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I'm excited about DJ Burns. I love the story.
How much is that going to hurt if he thwarts your Purdue natty?
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with whatever happens with DJ Burns. Like, the thing about NC State I find really interesting, do you feel like they feel like a Cinderella team?
Cinderella team kind of like implies that you're like a George Mason, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you take a step back and kind of look at it from the standpoint of like, this is a team that was by no means ever supposed to make it past the Sweet 16. Right. And here they are in the Final Four. Like, by definition, like they kind of have to be.
Well, this is
but
thing.
It doesn't have the same vibe.
That's exactly how I feel about it. But NC State's an 11 seed, which ties them for the lowest seed or highest seed, I guess, however you define seeding.
Biggest number seed.
Yeah, the numberest seed ever.
Yeah.
I'll say highest seed because it's an 11, but it ties them for the highest seed number to ever make a Final Four.
Yeah.
And it's happened 5 times before an 11 seed has made the Final Four. UCLA in 21, Loyola Chicago in 18, VCU in 2011. The aforementioned George Mason in 2006 was an 11 seed, and LSU in 1986. I think when teams like UCLA, LSU, NC State make it as a lower seed like this, it's not as exciting because, like, for a big school to have a low seed, it means you were a disappointment. For a small school like George Mason to get an 11 seed, it's like you're a good mid-major. So it's like that's what 11 seeds are, is like they're bad high majors or good mid-majors. And you're right to say NC State shouldn't have made it past the Sweet 16. They shouldn't have been in the tournament, Matt. They had to win. They did the UConn. They did the Kemba Walker. They won 5 games in 5 days to win the ACC tournament and even be here in the first place. And that first game, if Virginia just makes their damn free throws, NC State's not even in the tournament at all. You know, the guy from Virginia misses the free throw that would have put them up 4. NC State comes down and hits the 3 to tie. They win in overtime, and then they go on to beat Duke and North Carolina in that tournament. 5 games in 5 days, get hot. Like, it's a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
It's super exciting. So, I mean, if they knock off Purdue, I'm just going to be like excited because it'll be the lowest, highest, whatever the fucking seeding is. They will be the
Well,
highest number seed to ever make the finals.
and the irony too is like if they knock off Purdue, most likely they're facing UConn in the national championship. So they're going up against UConn while they're kembaing. Like,
That is the literal definition of irony. My sister is somewhere listening to this podcast going, "That's it. That's the definition of irony. Adam finally got it." But I needed Matt to do it for me. We have
you're welcome, Aaron.
a very long ongoing joke with my sister about what is actually ironic versus what's coincidental. So, yeah, it doesn't feel super Cinderella-y just because they are a big school, but like this is the literal definition of a Cinderella.
Yeah.
A low seed making it all this way, a team that shouldn't even have been there in the first place making it. I love DJ Burns, but I think the proverbial glass slipper falls off this weekend against Purdue. I DJ Burns, one of the best things about him is for his size. He's 6'9", 285.
Yeah.
And he's so nimble. And he's
Mhm.
so like, you don't expect that level of nimbleness and like elusiveness from a guy that size. But pretty much every game that we've seen so far, opposing teams have had to throw doubles and triples at him
Mhm.
because they can't handle that size. Well, he's going to be in the post against Zach Edey this weekend. And I'm pretty sure that Zach Edey is going to be okay with guarding a dude who's smaller than him. You know, like Zach Edey's probably going to swallow him up in the post. And I don't think Purdue's going to have to throw as many like doubles and triples at him.
Well, I mean, let's kind of call it what it is. Like, despite Zach Edey putting up the numbers that he has, like Purdue has just let I don't even want to say they've let the other team hang in there. Like they struggled enough against their last two opponents, despite the big numbers, right? That like they were kind of hanging in there right till the end. And quite frankly, if those teams hit some of their open shots and actually make a respectable amount of their free throws, like that game could go the other way easily. And neither of those teams had someone anywhere near as physically capable of like sticking with Edey either. So, I'm not saying that like NC State's going to come in there and win it, but I do kind of feel like they at least have a little bit more of a fighting chance against Edey because of Burns, because you don't have to viciously throw double after double at him, but you can still sprinkle it in there enough for him to kind of like be off kilter a little bit. And again, at the end of the day, like you've got to make your shots.
Yeah, by no means is this a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'll say is that this reminds me of the Dallas Cowboys being the first 2 seed ever to lose to a 7 seed in the NFL playoffs. If any team is ever going to lose to a double-digit seed in the Final Four, it's gonna be fucking Purdue. It's 100. That's such a Purdue thing to do. Like, who else would do that aside from Purdue? This is the same reason we should have bet against the Cowboys in the NFL playoffs. Because, like, if anybody was going to be the first 2 seed to ever lose to a 7, it was going to be the Cowboys. And it was. So this game is by no means a foregone conclusion, but I do like Purdue to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really easy for everyone to kind of look at that final score against Tennessee and like what Edey put up in the box score and forget that like Tennessee could not hit a free throw to save their life, and they were one of the best free throw shooting teams in the entire nation. Uh, and like if they just do that, that totally flips the script on those last few possessions. So, this is not a team in Purdue that has been playing super clean.
Yeah,
That's my worry for them. It's not that they like aren't the more talented, better team. It's that they continually get away with not playing clean by the other team kind of falling apart.
my concern is just that they're Purdue. It's
Well, that's a shorter
Purdue.
way of
Like,
saying what I just said. So
is Purdue really going to win a national championship? I know I picked
no,
them, but like,
no.
it's Purdue.
That's why I went with UConn.
It's Purdue. And just it's the same thing that I say about the Buffalo Bills every time people pick the Bills to do things. I'm like, it's the Bills. Come on. Yeah, so I'm excited about DJ Burns versus Zach Edey. My concern more for Purdue would be that you just let Dalton Connect go off for 37 against you.
Mm-hmm.
Who, by the way, I think Connect might have played his way into being a top 10 pick in
Yeah.
this tournament with how weak this draft class is. He's going to be that classic guy when we get to draft season where I'm like, okay, I know that he's older, but he knows how to play basketball. And someone
Yeah.
else is going to be like, but look at this guy. He could jump 50 inches and dunk between his legs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but like this guy knows how to play
You,
basketball and he's good at it.
yeah. It's a potentially slightly better version of Luke Kennard.
Yeah, I do this every year with the NBA draft podcast.
Yeah.
But they just let him go off. And like, while all the focus has been on Brian Burns, like there are other guys on that NC State team who are very good, especially what's his name? DJ Burns.
Yeah.
The point guard has been balling as well as a lot, or DJ Horn. That's what it is. I'm so confused. I said Brian Burns. I said,
Yeah. Yeah. Then when you said DJ Burns, I'm like, all right, you're correcting it.
we're getting into
We're getting into our
but I
NFL
said that.
too quick.
Yeah, I said the point guard is DJ Burns though, and the point guard's DJ Horn. There's two
Yeah.
guys on the team named DJ. There's the center DJ Burns, the point guard DJ Horn, and they're both very good. And Horn. I've got them all fucked up. I'm leaving this all in. It all stays. I'm not editing this. Matt and I, at the end of this pod and going into next week, we're going to start talking NFL draft, and I have NFL on the mind. And I guess I still can't get over the fact that the Giants got Brian Burns for like 10 cents on the dollar. But DJ Horn, very good. I would be worried about him too if I was Purdue. You got to find a way to guard the perimeter a little bit better. And I want to see if DJ Burns, the center, my guy, refrigerator on wheels, can knock down some shots from like the elbow, because like Zach Edey's not going to step out on him. That's not his game. We've seen it for the whole tournament, is that he sags into the paint. So if he can hit some elbow jumpers, you get Horn involved. They got the other point guard whose name is escaping me right now from NC State, so I'm not even going to try it because I know I'm going to fuck it up. Is a really, really good 3-point shooter. I think he hit the most threes in NC State history this year, and he's hit some deep ones in the tournament. So like they're not a one-trick pony. There's been games in this tournament where Burns has had like 4, 4, and 7, and they've won.
Yeah.
And then there's been games like the Duke game where he drops 29. It's like, they have a variable attack, and I don't think it's like a one-on-one for sure. And then on the other side of the bracket, UConn and Alabama, I just don't see a world where Alabama beats UConn.
Yeah, RIP.
Yeah, like awesome for you, Bama, to make your first Final Four ever. That's great.
Just don't give up a 30-0 run.
UConn's
that's the goal.
Yeah, UConn's been fucking smashing everyone. And I was watching that Illinois game, and it was either tied or like a 2-point game at halftime. And I was like, wow, look at them really like hanging in there with UConn. I'm impressed. Boom, 30-0 run. I was like, okay, not impressed anymore. Thank you. So they've won like 10 or 11 straight NCAA tournament games going back to last season. And their average margin of victory is like over 20 points per game. And it's over 27 points per game in this tournament. They're a machine. Um, Donovan Klingane. I'm all messed up with names. I'm sorry. The center, they have their own 7-2 center who's been dominating. He had 5
Yeah.
blocks in their last game against Illinois. He's been awesome. That's another matchup I would really look forward to if we do get Purdue and UConn, is to see the 7-4 center go up against the 7-2 center.
Yeah, I mean that's the only like real fair physical matchup for Edey.
So, any other thoughts on the NCAA tournament, or do you want to go to the NFL draft so I can stop getting everybody's name incorrect?
What makes you think that's gonna stop it?
Because my problem in life right now is that I spend an inordinate amount of time every single day thinking about what the Patriots are going to do with the number 3 pick. I I read about it.
You already know what the pick's gonna be.
I know. Which, okay, let's go to the NFL draft because I want to talk about this. So, college basketball, 2 games on Saturday. I'm picking UConn and Purdue, and I'm going to stick with my original pick of Purdue to win the championship. I want to pick UConn, but I'm too invested in the Purdue thing. I think they're going to Purdue it. Are you? I'm assuming you're going UConn.
I'm going UConn. I like how you say you think they're gonna do it, but like you just spelled out how you don't actually believe it.
That's the Adam Fowler special on the podcast, because then I can come back next week and be like, well, I didn't really think they were going to do it. You heard what I said. I play both sides so that I win either way.
You see, I'm playing both sides.
Haha, that's the trick. It's like, you pick the Chiefs to win the championship, you pick them to win the Super Bowl, and then in the playoffs, you pick against them. And then no matter what happens, you're like, oh, well, I picked them to win the Super Bowl, so I'm right. Or you say like, pick the Ravens to beat them, so I'm doubly wrong, because you have to be fucking stupid to pick the Ravens to beat them at this point.
Yeah, what kind of jackass would do that?
We should have accounted for the fact they were going to run the ball 9 times. They ran the ball 6 times with their running backs, Matt. They only handed it off 6 times. I'm never going to get over it. I'm never going to get over it. And I hate the Ravens.
No one should.
I still think about it every day. When that happened, I came on the pod and said, I'm going to think about this every day for the rest of my life. And now here we are, 3 months later, I'm still fucking thinking about it. But speaking of football, NFL draft, I want to kind of go back to the Patriots thing. Next week, we're going to do big storylines and draft debates, where we're going to talk about some of the big debates in the draft, like who should be QB2, who should be wide receiver 2 between like Odunze and Neighbors. Would you take Drake May or Jaden Daniels? Like we're going to let you guys know where Matt and I weigh in on all of those debates next week. But we want to take a couple minutes to kind of kick off our draft coverage right now and just talk about things that are kind of top of mind for the NFL draft. The first thing that comes to mind for me for the NFL draft, JJ McCarthy owes me $1 million, at least. When mock draft started coming out, when he won the national championship, he was like a late first, maybe a second round pick, depending on what outlet you went to. I have memed him to the Patriots at 3 into existence. I want everybody to know, if you get drafted 20th, which is where he was projected to go before, your contract is like $15-16 million. If you get drafted 30, or if you get drafted 3rd overall, your contract is $38 million. I personally made him $23 million by memeing this into existence. JJ, throw me one. You owe me. I made you 20 million. You can spare 1. That's what I think about when I think about the draft. I'm like, this motherfucker owes me money. Hey, what you owe, JJ McCarthy? I almost said DJ McCarthy. I'm losing my shit over here.
See, I told you that changing to football wasn't going to fix it. This particular draft class is setting up to be an interesting, like, weird arms race because it is like arguably the best wide receiver class that we've seen, like, period. Really. Like, we've seen some great ones over the last several years, but like the depth at the top of this class is pretty insane. And there's like, I know everyone has differing opinions on different guys going down, but like the depth is pretty good. And this is like really good in this draft at wide receiver. So there's this weird like cat and mouse that happens with that is like, okay, well, everyone's, bolstering up on wide receivers. Well, we got to bolster up on the other side of the ball. Two main ways that teams do that is, especially to, deal with the passing game, is cornerbacks and edge rushers. This is not a good class for pass rushers. Edge rushers, I should say. It's okay at corner. Like there's some pretty good guys up top, but like I don't think it's particularly stellar. So like teams are gonna have to get creative. And I'm interested to see like what these teams are gonna do because we already saw today like the Texans went out and got themselves Stephon Diggs for next to nothing. Like there's gonna be some teams that are just stacked up with offensive weapons, and like there's gonna be some teams that are gonna have to counter that on the defensive side of the ball.
I think it's really interesting. You just brought up the Stephon Diggs trade, and there are so many interesting things about that trade. But one of them
we can do a full podcast on that one.
We might. One of them that's like a bigger picture thing for me though is it's kind of twofold. The first thing is that we have multiple teams with elite quarterbacks who have like artificially created a need at wide receiver this offseason. So the Chargers cut Mike Williams, and we talked about on the podcast a couple of weeks ago in free agency, like, of course, the Chargers charge in the offseason and have to cut Mike Williams. And then they trade Keenan Allen for nothing.
Yeah.
They get a fourth from Chicago. And then you have Buffalo, who lets Gabe Davis walk in free agency and then trades away Stephon Diggs, a fifth and a sixth, and all they get back is a second. And they have to eat like $31 million in dead cap. And it just takes me back to the same point we always make on this podcast. And I think it's absolutely hysterical that Buffalo and the Chargers are the two teams to do it. The NFL is a copycat league. We just watched Patrick Mahomes win the Super Bowl with basically no weapons. And now it's like, hey, I think we could do that. Buffalo and the Chargers. They're like, yeah, we got good quarterbacks. We could win the Super Bowl with like no wide receivers. It'll be fine. It's like, this is what we always talk about on the podcast, is that it's a copycat league, but what matters is not that you're copying someone. It matters what lesson you take from what we just watched. And the lesson that these teams took is like, maybe we don't need elite wide receivers to help our quarterbacks.
When the correct lesson was, we need Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, I was going to say the correct lesson is that if you don't have Patrick Mahomes, you're not winning the Super Bowl anyways.
Yeah.
That's the lesson you all should have learned. The Texans clearly did not learn that lesson because they've looked at all their cap space and it was burning a hole in their pocket. So they used all of it. Every single penny. They're like, Joe Mixon, can we pay you more? Will you take more money? Please, Joe Mixon. Have you ever seen the YouTube Moneyball video about the Yankees?
I don't think so.
Oh God, I got to send you. I can't believe I've never sent you this. Yes, I'm going to send it to you as soon as we're done recording. But it's a short YouTube thing making fun of the movie Moneyball. And it's the Yankees. And they're like, they're talking about how they're like, God, we got to come up with new ways to spend money. and they're like talking to a free agent, and he's like, I don't know, I've never played baseball for $100 million before. And the guy opens like a gold briefcase. He's like, what about $200 million? And the guy's like, deal. So it's like the opposite of Moneyball, where they're just trying to spend as much money as possible. And I was thinking about that after we were texting about the Texans today, spending all their cap spaces. I'm like, they go to Joe Mixon and they're like, hey, we traded for you. And he's like, cool, I'd like a $7 million extension. And they're like, what about a $13 million extension? Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely wild.
I do think it's a smart move by the Texans to spend around CJ Stroud. Right. You have a awesome rookie quarterback on a cheap deal for another couple of years. Spend the money right now and get him help, because you're going to have to spend it on him later and make cuts other places. Not that it matters, because you don't have Patrick Mahomes and you're not going to win the Super Bowl anyway, but you could get to an AFC championship. Pretty good.
You could have the honor of losing to Patrick Mahomes.
I mean, that's the best that anybody not named Patrick Mahomes can hope for at this point. Right? Like, the best thing is to be Patrick Mahomes. The second best thing is to get as far as you can and lose to Patrick Mahomes.
That's the true Super Bowl.
That's my Super Bowl. It's like Ravens versus Buffalo. Winner gets to lose to Patrick Mahomes next week. If like Buffalo's like, this is our fucking Super Bowl, guys. Let's go out there and win it.
The Ravens are like, all right, let's run it 6 times.
No, they saved that for Patrick Mahomes.
It's true.
Like, I was talking to Andrew Tay actually recently, from our old friend from Greatest Games Never Played. And he was like, this is why I think the NFL is rigged, because they ran the ball 6 times in that game. And I was like, yeah, except for the fact that we've seen them do this before, where they're just like, just completely abandon everything that's ever worked for them all at the same time.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is really funny about the Stephon Diggs trade is Stephon Diggs just strikes me as a player who's never going to win a Super Bowl. I just can't picture Stephon Diggs ever winning a Super Bowl. And because he's played for the Vikings and the Bills.
Yeah.
Like, the two teams that are just never going to win a Super Bowl. And if you had to, like, if you were like, okay, what other teams are never going to win a Super Bowl, Adam? I would be like the Chargers. And I don't feel like the Texans would be that far down on the list.
Yeah.
Of like, I just can't, they're an expansion team. I just can't see them winning a Super Bowl no matter how good they are.
Yeah, I could see it. And it, like, too, he's one of those guys too that, like, if it did happen, I fully see him having like a Kevin Garnett moment where he's just like absolutely lost his fucking mind and is screaming nonsensically.
I mean, the bigger problem for him is that he doesn't play for the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's just
it's
not going to happen. My other draft thought that I wanted to share is, if you are a fan of a major college football program, I am instantly don't care about any of your opinions about the players who went to your program. Nope. Thank you. I think I'm a good draft analyst because I went to Western, and there's like one prospect every 10 or 15 years that I'll be too high. Like, I was too high on Corey Davis, right? Like, we were too excited about Corey Davis. If you are an LSU fan, I'm not going to name any names of LSU fans, but I was listening to a podcast with a big notable LSU fan, who's a big media guy, and they were asking him about Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors. And he basically said that Jaden Daniels is Michael Vick if Michael Vick was more accurate and a better passer. And they're like, well, what about Lamar Jackson? And he's like, oh, Daniels is a better passer than Lamar Jackson. He's more like Robert Griffin III if Robert Griffin III could run better. And if that wasn't enough, he said that Malik Neighbors is the next Tyreek Hill and that his ceiling is higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. And I said, Van Lathan, those are the worst opinions I've ever heard. Oh, I said I wasn't going to name names. Oops. Slipped out. My bad.
Yeah. Let's just subtly say that Daniels is a better passer than a two-time MVP.
Yeah. just like, and I use him as an example, and I'm making fun of him. I actually enjoyed Van Lathan's work for the most part, so I don't want to give the wrong impression. But like, I've had JJ McCarthy conversations with Michigan fans, and I can't do it. We're just going to disagree. I think you and me are just going to disagree on JJ McCarthy next week.
Oh, I mean, my take on him is he looks like a kid who hasn't played enough.
Yeah. See, you're a reasonable fan though. Like I
Yeah.
can have conversations with you. That's why we
Yeah.
have a podcast. Other
Yeah.
people are like, JJ McCarthy is the best quarterback in this class. And I'm
No,
like,
like
I
I think like if you look if you watch his tape, like he shows glimpses of all the things that you want him to do. But he also was playing at Michigan where Jim Harbaugh is going to literally burst into flames if they throw the ball more than 40% of the time. So he was never going to get the opportunity to get the reps as a passer.
Van Lathan also said that they were talking about JJ McCarthy throwing the ball 8 times versus Penn State. And he's like, oh, well, Jim Harbaugh was coaching and just wanted to embarrass Penn State in that game. Jim Harbaugh was suspended for that game. So, like, I'm really discounting his college football opinions. But
Also, like McCarthy was got injured in that game and continued to play through the injury in that game. So, like, part of that was protecting him.
my big fear with JJ McCarthy is that this is Zach Wilson 2.0. I just,
Yeah.
I don't love quarterback prospects who, the further away we get from actually playing football,
Mm-hmm.
the higher they go up the boards. I think if I was a college football player at this point,
Well,
I would
that
just,
was Josh Allen.
yep, that's fair. I mean, there's examples both ways,
So,
but like,
yeah.
if I was a college football player at this point, I would just not play in any games. And all I would do is work on drills and answering NFL teams' interview questions because that's all they care about.
Yeah.
Right? They want to like you and they want to like watch you without pads on and be like, oh my God, did you see that guy's pro day? I do not give a single fuck about how you looked in your pro day. That's like the thing I care
Yeah.
the least about. But we haven't played football in 3 months.
Yeah.
And guys like Jaden Daniels and guys like JJ McCarthy are like flying up people's boards.
Mm-hmm.
When we got done playing football, right when football finished, we were like, Caleb Williams, Drake May, this is an elite quarterback class. These guys are both really high level
Yeah.
prospects. They're really good. Now we're here 3 months later and people are like, you know who's really good? JJ McCarthy. That Drake May guy, oh God, don't know about him. Look at him. I don't know. But for 2 years, we sat here and said, oh my God, this quarterback class with Caleb Williams and Drake May, holy shit.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I don't want to give away too much for next week, but I think Drake May is one of those classic, like, we've spent way too much time looking at this prospect, guys.
Yeah, it's like prospect fatigue.
Yeah. And we're just trying to put other guys over him because we're not as fatigued on Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, then next week's not going to be very fun, Matt. Where's the debate?
I'll challenge you a little bit on JJ.
There we go.
Well, I think another thing that kind of sticks out to me too is the NFL told you when free agency opened exactly how they feel about this running back class. Like, if you are someone who really loves watching running back film in draft season, like, this is not the year. There's just not a ton of guys. There's not a lot of guys that are very exciting. And I think like the first handful of guys that go off the board are probably going to be the few that like really do much in the NFL. I mean, there's probably going to be a late surprise or two, but like this is not one of those years where it's like, oh yeah, I'll just like get one in the fourth round and I know he'll be fine.
Yeah, it kind of sucks for us because our dynasty team desperately needs running backs.
Yeah.
And we have like 10 draft picks because we traded away a bunch of people. Uh, we traded away a bunch of people, still made the playoffs, still made it to the second round of the playoffs. And now we have 10 draft picks and like 4 spots on our roster that we're trying to figure out. So,
Yeah.
but we need running backs. And it's like, I mean, I guess unless like Jonathan Brooks gets drafted in the first round by Dallas or something like that, which I could totally
Yeah.
see Jerry Jones doing that, then the hype train is going to start. It's going to start up big time, right? Because they let Tony Pollard go. They don't really have a running back. They could draft one and stick him in there. I don't know that it's a great year for drafting running backs in Dynasty, which is why we're trying to consolidate picks right now and get one of the big time wide receivers. See how
Yeah.
that goes. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I think this whole like teams potentially trading up, trading down thing is really interesting. It's, there's a lot of smoke screens right now.
I think Minnesota has pretty much like telegraphed they're trying to go up.
Yeah, this is another thing we're going to talk about next week. So I don't want to step on it too much, but
Yeah.
trading away, like they want to get up into the top 5 to draft a quarterback.
Yeah.
Is the rumor and kind of what they're telegraphing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, God, you really want to give up a top 5 pick for like 11, 23 and next year's first, which is going to be like a mid round first, you know? I feel
Yeah.
like it's going to be a little bit more expensive for them to get up and try to get one of these guys. I also kind of look at this situation like right now, a lot of mocks have like 4 quarterbacks being the first 4 picks.
Yeah.
And I wonder if one of those guys could be like the Will Levis situation where you hear
Mm-hmm.
all these rumors of like Indianapolis has guaranteed Will Levis will not go past 4th. And it's like,
Yeah.
oops, Will Levis is a second round pick. Our
Yeah.
bad. So I don't, I guess like JJ McCarthy would be that guy. Maybe Jaden Daniels could potentially be that guy. Because I definitely
Well,
think
yeah.
Williams and May are going in the top 3.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people throw around that they think as many as like 6 quarterbacks go in the first. And I can tell you right now, like I don't see any way that Michael Penix or Bo Nix goes in the first round. I don't think either one of them has shown anything to indicate that they're special enough for
Yeah,
that.
but did you see how Michael Penix looked throwing in shorts the other day? Oh my God, the guy in his shorts.
Yeah.
Amazing. I can't
Yeah.
stand the pro days.
Right. Because
Can't
like
stand it.
here's the thing, like people freak out about that and then they forget about how they both fell completely flat when they went to the All-Star games. Neither one of them looked good.
This is the thing that drives me crazy about the pro days. Is like it's a similar situation to what I was talking about with JJ and Jaden.
Mm-hmm.
That when we stopped playing football, Michael Penix was not a first round pick,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden after his pro day, reporters are coming out and being like, surefire first round pick after that pro day. God damn it. I could go out and look good in a pro day if I had enough time to prepare, right? Like I
Right.
can't throw a ball 70 yards downfield, but I could like throw some timing routes in shorts perfectly. Like, get me out in the backyard, watch me throw the football to my dog, and people are going to be like, this guy, first round pick. We really like him. He answered all the questions well, and he throws good slants to his dog in the backyard. I think he's got something. Sneaky athletic guy, that Adam.
I'm also like a firm believer of the fact that like there is just a scarcity of good quarterbacks in general, right? Like they just don't happen. So if I believe in Caleb Williams, which I do, and I believe in Drake May, which I do, then like how am I going to be confident enough to say that the next 2 teams in the draft are both going to go quarterback?
I know people are like, this is such a good quarterback class. There's like 6 guys. Probably one of them, maybe 2 are going to be good.
Yeah. I mean,
with the hit rate of quarterbacks in the NFL.
has everyone forgotten the Trevor Lawrence draft?
I'm trying to. I try to
Like,
every day.
like that was hammered into us just like how good all of them were. And like it's been an abject disaster. Like the best one has been Trevor Lawrence, and quite frankly, he has not been good.
He's been starting caliber.
Yeah, like being kind by calling him average.
I do love me some Caleb Williams. We're going to talk about Caleb Williams.
Oh, we're going to talk
on
about
a podcast coming. We're talking about a lot of Caleb Williams. All right. Before we ruin too much stuff from the next month of podcast, that is it for us.
Yeah.
As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. Whether you want to or not is up to you because Twitter's a cesspool. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. And you can email us, fouledOutsports@gmail.com. Appreciate you guys listening. Would love to hear from you. We'll be back next Thursday with the big storylines, big debates from the draft. We're going to talk about Daniels versus May versus McCarthy, talk about Odunze versus Neighbors. We're going to talk about what the Patriots should do with the 3rd pick, because that has been the biggest debate in my life recently, especially with my father, who, most people most people argue with their parents about like finances or life or political views. I sat at the kitchen table and got in an argument with my dad the other day about whether or not the Patriots should trade down. So that's on the list for next week, along with a couple other items that are big draft debates going on right now. So that'll be next week. I think the week after is going to be My Guys, a podcast that annually has, we get like almost all of our guys are like all rookies or like awesome 2nd-year guys and all that stuff. Yeah. This year, I'm going to make the all-star team of all of the My Guys that Matt and I have picked over the last 3 years. It's like,
it's intense.
It's Jordan Love, Chris Olave. I could go on and on about all the guys that we've picked, but it's like
okay. Like Jordan Love is very revisionist.
It is not. I love Jordan Love. I've always loved Jordan Love.
Yeah, but like he really only had like half of a good season.
What matters is now.
Let's have him put together a full 17 games.
No, let's put him on the all-star team and brag about how I got that one right before I get it wrong again. But we'll put together the all-star team. There's a lot of guys I just can't. They're not coming off the top of my head right now that both Matt and I have had over the years.
Well, Branch.
Yep. Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, Tariq Woolen, Javon Holland. Who else? You had Devon Witherspoon.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the bookkeeper on that. So
I know I have all the notes in the cabinet next to me. I just really have to dig through them. So I'll put the full team together this year and you guys. Oh, Trey McBride was on there.
Yep.
Another good one. He's broken out. So yeah, a lot of good picks on that one. You guys are going to want to tune into that one. I'm going to tell you guys that one of my guys is going to be drafted very, very high in this draft. Very high, which is not something that we typically do, but this guy's been one of my guys for 3 years now. So I have to put him on the podcast. And then I think we're going to do a mock draft with our friends from Certified Beef. We'll get that out. That's going to be like a bonus podcast one week. And then maybe some like gambling advice. And then Matt and I are going to the draft in Detroit. Yep. We're trying to figure that out for the end of this month. And then we'll be back with like draft recap, talk about our experience going to the draft for the first time ever, all of that fun stuff. So
get it right, NFL.
Super fun month of podcasting. We're looking forward to breaking it all down for you. But first, enjoy the Final Four this weekend. The Final Four games are on Saturday. Championship game is on Monday. Maybe watch a little women's college basketball. UConn versus Iowa. Might have that on for a while. Paige Buchers versus Caitlin Clark. And then besides that, there's basketball season's winding down here. Hockey season's winding down. We're getting into the playoffs soon, so there's a lot of good stuff coming. But until next week, we will see you guys soon.
Yeah, and you all go out into the world and find the true meaning of irony.
Go ask Aaron.
Yeah,
Aaron will tell you.
Just go find Aaron.
Yeah, and in no uncertain terms, Aaron will tell you that you're wrong about what the definition of irony is. So, all right, guys, we will see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.